A quiet evening inside a small cafe in Manhattan. Rain taps softly against the windows. Daniel Carter, 38, a single dad and part-time waiter, wipes down the last table before closing. His young daughter Lucy, 7, sits nearby drawing in a notebook. Most customers have already left. Suddenly the cafe door opens. A woman walks in alone. Elegant, calm, but clearly exhausted. She glances around the nearly empty room. Then she walks toward Daniel and asks softly, "Can I sit here?" Daniel nods politely. 10 minutes later, 5 black SUVs suddenly stop outside the cafe. Bright lights, heavy doors. The true secret is finally out. Daniel Carter was a man who had lived 2 very different lives in a single decade, moving from the aggressive roar of high finance to the gentle, rhythmic hum of a neighborhood espresso machine. 10 years ago, the name Daniel Carter was whispered with immense respect in the high-stakes boardrooms of Wall Street. He was a brilliant financial analyst, a man who could see complex patterns in numbers that others missed, a rising star with a corner glass office and a collection of tailored silk suits that cost more than his current annual salary. His life back then was measured in percentages, margins, and the frantic, heart-pounding ticking of the stock ticker. He had it all: the prestige, the influence, and a wife, Sarah, who was the bright sun around which his ambitious world orbited. He remembered the cold taste of expensive champagne and the hollow metallic feeling of winning a multi-million-dollar deal while losing his soul to the relentless demands of the clock. But those days felt like they belonged to a stranger from a distant, much colder universe. 5 years ago, his carefully constructed world suffered a catastrophic structural failure in the span of a few short months. Sarah passed away during a sudden, aggressive illness that no amount of private wealth or international medical expertise could cure. In the hollow, crushing silence that followed her funeral, Daniel realized a terrifying truth. The 80-hour work weeks and the frantic pursuit of digits on a glowing screen were stealing the only thing he had left. He looked at his then 3-year-old daughter, Lucy, and saw a child who needed a father's physical and emotional presence, not just a shadow in an expensive silk tie who came home long after she was already asleep. He realized that no bonus check or stock option could buy back a single minute of the time she spent crying for her mother. Daniel made a choice that shocked his peers and sent ripples of confusion through his prestigious firm. He walked away. He quit the millions, the pressure, and the hollow prestige of the corporate ladder with the same clinical decisiveness he once used to liquidate a failing fund. He traded his leather briefcase for a simple service apron and his glass office for the Blue Bean, a cozy neighborhood cafe in a quiet, forgotten corner of Manhattan. He wanted a life where he could be present for every single bedtime story, every school play, and every rainy afternoon. He wanted to be the first face Lucy saw in the morning and the last one she kissed at night. The income was modest, just enough to cover the rent of a small, sun-drenched apartment and the occasional weekend treat. But the schedule was a priceless gift he refused to trade for anything. Today, Daniel is a master of the simple things: the perfect temperature of steamed milk, the friendly greeting to a regular, and the patient cleaning of a messy table. He is there when Lucy wakes up, and he is there when she steps off the yellow school bus with her backpack swinging. Lucy is now 7, a bright, resilient spark of a girl who carries her mother's sparkling eyes and her father's quiet, observant nature. She is the cafe's unofficial mascot and its heart. The walls of the Blue Bean are adorned with her drawings, each one representing a different customer she has befriended over the years. To the world, she is just a child. To Daniel, she is the masterpiece he was always meant to build. Every afternoon after school, Lucy sets up her office at a small, round corner table in the back of the room. She spreads out her math worksheets and fills her notebooks with vibrant, imaginative drawings of secret gardens, magical creatures, and sanctuary trees, while the smell of freshly roasted beans fills the air. The regular customers adore her. They call her the little manager, and she often rewards their kindness with a hand-drawn sticker or a story about her day. Daniel watches her from across the room as he clears plates, feeling a sense of grounded peace that his corporate life never could provide. He isn't just a waiter, he is a teacher, instilling in Lucy the simple, unshakable values of kindness, honesty, and humility. He tells her every day, "Lucy, we don't measure a person by what they have, but by how they treat the person who can do absolutely nothing for them." On this particular rainy evening, the city outside was a blurred watercolor of gray and neon, and the cafe was winding down for the night. The rain drummed a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the glass panes. The last few patrons had ducked out into the drizzle, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic scratching of Lucy's crayons. Daniel was halfway through wiping down the chrome espresso machine, thinking about the warm pasta dinner he was going to cook at home, when the bell above the door chimed. A lonely, clear sound that echoed in the empty room. A woman stepped in, her silk coat damp from the Manhattan mist, her posture radiating a fatigue that went far deeper than a simple lack of sleep. She didn't look like the typical Manhattan elite seeking a quick caffeine fix. She looked like a woman who had been running a race for years and had finally reached her limit. Her voice was a soft, trembling whisper when she looked into Daniel's eyes and asked, "Can I sit here?" Daniel looked up from the table, meeting the stranger's gaze, and saw a reflection of a bone-deep weariness he recognized all too well. He didn't see the expensive glint of her jewelry or the high-end label on her damp coat. He saw a human being who looked like she was carrying the weight of an entire world on her fragile shoulders. He remembered the feeling of that weight, the suffocating pressure of being someone every second of the day, where every smile is a negotiation and every breath is monitored by a board of directors or a camera lens. He saw the Iron Queen persona flickering like a dying bulb, revealing the tired woman underneath. "Of course," Daniel said with a polite, welcoming smile, pulling out a chair for her. "Please take a seat. I was just about to close, but I can get you whatever you need. We're in no rush." The woman sat down heavily, her shoulders dropping an inch as if she had finally stepped inside a safe harbor after a month at sea. She didn't ask for a menu. She ordered only a simple cup of chamomile tea, her fingers interlaced tightly on the worn wooden tabletop, as if trying to keep herself from shattering. Daniel moved behind the counter, preparing the tea with a quiet, practiced precision. He added a small sprig of fresh mint and a teaspoon of local honey, knowing how a warm cup could act as a shield against a cold night in a colder world. When he brought the tea to the table, he noticed the woman was staring at one of Lucy's drawings, a picture of a big, colorful tree with a tiny, glowing house hidden deep inside the branches. "Did you draw this?" the woman asked, her voice regaining a bit of its natural strength, though her eyes remained soft and searching. Lucy nodded proudly, her face lighting up with an innocent, unshielded joy. "It's a sanctuary tree. My dad says everyone needs a place where the rain can't touch them and the wind can't blow them away. Even big trees need a little house sometimes." Hoola! The woman's eyes shimmered for a moment, visibly touched by the girl's simple, profound wisdom. "Your dad is right, Lucy. It's the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. I think I've been looking for a tree like that for a long time." Lucy, never one to let a stranger stay a stranger for long, pushed a plate of half-eaten cookies toward the center of the table. "You look like you need a cookie. They're oatmeal. My dad makes them best because he puts extra cinnamon and a little bit of magic in them. He says magic is just another word for being there when it matters." The woman laughed, a genuine warm sound that seemed to surprise even her. She took a small bite, closing her eyes for a moment to savor the flavor. To her, it tasted like a childhood she had long forgotten, a time before market shares, hostile takeovers, and the crushing expectation of perfection. "I'm Sophia," she said, looking at the father and daughter with a newfound intense curiosity, "and I think this might be the best cookie I've had in my entire life. It tastes like safety." Daniel sat back down to help Lucy pack her crayons, and a casual, easy conversation began to flow through the nearly empty cafe, bridging the gap between the penthouse and the pavement. Sophia asked about Lucy's school, her favorite books, and her dreams of becoming an artist who painted homes for everyone who lost theirs. Lucy, in turn, talked about how her father used to work in a big glass tower with lots of angry people, but now he works here because he likes being my dad more than he likes making people sad with numbers. Daniel felt a slight, familiar flush of embarrassment, but he smiled at Sophia. She's a bit of an oversharer, he joked, his voice full of fatherly pride. Sophia shook her head, her gaze softening as she looked at Daniel's calloused but steady hands. Don't be embarrassed. She's incredibly lucky, Daniel. Most people spend their entire lives building towers and chasing shadows, only to realize they forgot to build the one thing that actually matters, a home. You chose the home. I think that makes you the smartest and most successful man in Manhattan. For the next 10 minutes, the massive social and financial chasm between them didn't exist. They weren't a billionaire heiress and a part-time waiter. They were just three people sharing a table, a story, and a warm sanctuary on a rainy night. Sophia seemed to absorb the warmth of the room, her tense expression melting into something peaceful and rare. She told them, in vague but honest terms, that she lived in a world where everyone always had a request, a demand, or a contract for her to sign. She told them that tonight she just wanted to walk until she found a window that looked like it had a heart beating behind it. Daniel listened without judgment, offering the same steady, grounding presence he gave to his daughter every single night. He noticed that as Sophia talked, she kept glancing at her watch, not with the impatience of someone who was late, but with the hollow look of a person who knew their time of peace was strictly limited. She thanked Lucy for the sticker, a small, hand-colored yellow sun, and tucked it carefully into the inner pocket of her designer coat, as if it were a rare, priceless diamond. For a brief, fleeting moment, the cafe felt exactly like the sanctuary tree Lucy had drawn. But the silence of the Manhattan street outside was about to be shattered by the mechanical, violent roar of reality. The atmosphere of the cafe changed with a sudden electric violence that made the air feel thick and the windows rattle in their frames. Just as Sophia was reaching for her cooling tea, three sets of high-intensity LED headlights cut through the rain, washing the interior of the cafe in a blinding, artificial white glare. Daniel stood up instinctively, his movements fast and precise, stepping slightly in front of Lucy. His old protective instincts from the financial world, the ones that warned him of approaching predators and market collapses, were screaming in his mind. Outside, five massive, armor-plated black SUVs pulled up to the curb with a synchronized, heavy screech of tires. The street, which had been empty and quiet seconds ago, was now filled with the low, aggressive growl of high-performance V8 engines. The remaining two customers in the far corner dropped their forks, their faces turning pale with confusion and sudden, sharp fear. Doors flew open simultaneously, and 10 men in sharp, charcoal suits and tactical earpieces stepped out into the pouring rain. They didn't run. They moved with a terrifying, calculated precision, fanning out across the sidewalk to secure every possible exit. They moved like a single cold machine. One man, taller than the rest, with a face like carved granite and carrying a handheld tracking scanner, rushed toward the cafe door and threw it open with a force that made the bell chime frantically. His eyes scanned the room with a predator's focus, identifying every person in a heartbeat. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. This level of security meant only one thing in New York: ultimate global power. The lead agent marched straight to the table, ignoring the waiter and the little girl entirely. He stopped 2 feet from Sophia, clicked his polished heels, and bowed his head with a level of deference usually reserved for royalty or heads of state. "Miss Bennett, we lost your tracking signal for 12 minutes. The director was about to declare a Stage 1 security emergency. You are in an unsecured, high-risk location," the agent shouted, his voice thick with a mix of relief and barely contained adrenaline. Sophia's expression shifted instantly. The warm, laughing woman who had just praised an oatmeal cookie and admired a child's drawing vanished behind a mask of cold, unshakable authority. In her place was the woman the world knew as Sophia Bennett, the only daughter of Elias Bennett, the multi-billionaire founder of Global Tech Systems. She was the incoming CEO of a company that controlled the data and infrastructure of half the planet. a woman whose slightest decision could move global markets and shift political alliances. The softness in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, analytical steel that seemed to lower the temperature of the room. The agents surrounded the table, creating a human wall of muscle and high-end technology between Sophia and the rest of the world. The Blue Bean Cafe suddenly felt like the center of a national security operation. The motorcade is secure, ma'am. We need to move now. Your father is waiting at the consulate for the board vote, and the New York office is on standby, the agent insisted, his hand hovering near his jacket in a way that signaled he was ready for a fight. Sophia looked at the tea she hadn't finished, then at the man in the apron who was still standing protectively over his daughter. She saw the look of realization in Daniel's eyes. The moment he understood exactly who had been sitting at his table, the cafe fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the crackle of the agent's radios and the rhythmic sound of the rain against the roof. The other customers were staring with their mouths wide open, realizing they had just witnessed a collision between two impossible worlds. Daniel looked at Sophia, and for a split second, he saw the other Sophia, the woman who liked oatmeal cookies, peeking out from behind the billionaire mask. She looked almost sorry that the magic of the sanctuary tree had been broken so abruptly by the reality of her life. One of the guards stepped toward Daniel, his expression suspicious, his hand moving as if Daniel were a threat. Sophia raised a single hand, a gesture so sharp and commanding that the guard stopped dead in his tracks. He is a friend, Harrison. You will treat this establishment and its owner with the absolute respect they deserve, she said, her voice like tempered steel. She stood up, smoothing her damp coat, the sunlight sticker Lucy gave her still tucked safely in her pocket. The agents began to usher her toward the door, their bodies moving in a synchronized dance of protection. Daniel didn't know what to say. The world he had fought so hard to leave behind was now standing in his dining room, reminding him of the power he had once chased. He felt no envy, only a strange sadness for the woman who lived in the center of that storm. He realized that while he had been a waiter for an hour, she was a prisoner for a lifetime. As the agents prepared to lead her out into the waiting SUVs, Sophia stopped at the threshold of the door, forcing the entire security detail to halt in unison. She turned back to look at Daniel, who was still standing by the table, his hand resting firmly on Lucy's shoulder. The glare of the headlights outside silhouetted her, making her look like a figure from another dimension, a queen returning to her throne. I apologize for the disruption, Daniel, Sophia said, her voice softening just enough for him to hear over the hum of the engines. My life is, rarely my own. I forgot how it feels to just sit in the rain and be a person. Daniel nodded slowly, his expression calm and devoid of the starstruck awe the guards usually saw in people. He didn't want a photo, a signature, or a favor. He just wanted her to be okay. It's not a problem, Miss Bennett. You weren't a CEO to us. You were just a guest who needed a seat, and you're always welcome here. Lucy, looking up from her notebook, held up a small, forgotten drawing she had just finished. You didn't finish your tea, Sophia. Is it too hot? My dad says tea is only good when you share the last drop. The innocent, simple question made Sophia laugh, a light, clear sound that cut through the tension of the armed guards. I'm sorry, Lucy. I have to go to a very long, very boring meeting. But I promise you, the tea was perfect. It was the best thing I've had in a long time. It warmed my heart more than the heater in that car ever could. Sophia looked at the room, then at the agents who were watching her every breath with analytical coldness. She realized that for the last hour, Daniel and Lucy were the only people in the city who hadn't looked at her and seen a stock price, a strategic opportunity, or a political asset. They had seen a tired woman who needed a cookie and a place to sit. Most people treat me like a goddess or a target once they know my name, Sophia said to Daniel. Why don't you? You know the world I come from. I can see it in your eyes. You've been in those glass towers too. Daniel leaned against the table, the same humble waiter he was an hour ago. Because when you walked in, you weren't global tech. You were just a person who looked like they needed a quiet place to sit. And in this cafe, that's all that matters. Wealth doesn't change the flavor of the tea, Sophia. It just changes the cup. And I've learned that the cup is far less important than the person holding it. Sophia stood there for a long moment, the rain lashing against the SUVs outside. She realized that the values Daniel was teaching his daughter, the strength and humility and the power of simple kindness, were more sophisticated than the technology her company sold. She saw a man who had conquered the world she lived in and decided that a 7-year-old's drawing was more valuable than a billion-dollar merger. He was living the life she secretly dreamed of every time she closed her eyes in a boardroom. If you believe kindness should never depend on status type, I will live kindly. Sophia reached out and shook Daniel's hand, a firm, respectful grip that bridged the massive gap between the Manhattan penthouse and the cafe floor. She looked at the yellow sun sticker one more time and gave Lucy a wink that promised a secret. I won't forget the cookie, Lucy, or the sanctuary tree. I think I need to plant one of my own. Maybe right in the middle of Wall Street. She turned and walked out into the rain, the agents closing ranks around her as she disappeared into the lead SUV. The motorcade pulled away in a flash of strobe lights and sirens, leaving the street silent and empty once again. Daniel and Lucy stood by the window, watching the red taillights vanish into the fog. The cafe felt smaller but much warmer than before. The week that followed was a whirlwind of rumors and local news reports about the billionaire in the cafe. Daniel tried to keep his life as normal as possible, focusing on Lucy's homework and the daily rhythm of the espresso machine. He didn't tell anyone about his past or his conversation with the heiress. He was content to be the ghost of Wall Street, hidden in plain sight. He had already won his battle with ambition. On Thursday morning, a sleek black sedan, not an SUV, pulled up to the cafe, and a courier delivered a simple, handwritten envelope. It wasn't a legal document or a lawsuit. It was an invitation to the global tech headquarters, not for a meeting, but for what Sophia called a reclamation. Daniel arrived at the towering glass skyscraper feeling out of place in his simple jacket, but the security guards, who had been briefed personally by the CEO, ushered him straight to the top floor. Sophia was there, sitting at a massive mahogany desk that overlooked the entire Manhattan skyline. But she stood up the moment he entered and led him to a small, comfortable sitting area she had newly built. It looked remarkably like the corner of his cafe, complete with worn wooden chairs and a view of a small rooftop garden. There was even a plate of oatmeal cookies. I've spent the last week thinking about that sanctuary tree, Daniel, she said. She explained that her company was launching a massive community outreach initiative to build safe spaces, parks, and educational centers for families in the underserved neighborhoods of the city. I have 1,000 executives who know how to manage money and build algorithms, Sophia said, her eyes bright with a new fierce purpose. But I don't have anyone who knows how to treat people like they actually matter. I don't have anyone who understands that a person is more than their position or their tax bracket. I need someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and still choose to be kind. I need a director of community foundations. She offered Daniel the role, a leadership position that focused on social impact and human connection, not profit. Daniel hesitated, looking at the city below. I have a daughter, Sophia. I won't give up my time with her for a title or a salary. I'm a dad first, a waiter second, and an analyst never again. Sophia smiled, a look of genuine respect in her eyes. That's exactly why I want you. The contract is flexible. You'll be home for every bedtime story. In fact, we're building a specialized school and art center in this very building that Lucy would love. You can help fix the city and still be there to fix her science projects. Daniel accepted, and over the following months, he transformed the company's relationship with New York. He used his financial brilliance to fund dreams instead of debts. He became the bridge between the world of gold and the world of grit. Final scene. Months later, Daniel is standing in the lobby of a brand new community center in Harlem. He is wearing a clean shirt, but he still carries the same humble, steady energy of the waiter from the Blue Bean. Lucy runs through the doors, her backpack swinging, and Sophia is right there to greet her with a high five and a brand new notebook for her drawings. They were no longer strangers at a table. They were partners in building a world where everyone had a seat. Voiceover ending. She walked into a small cafe looking for a quiet place to sit. He welcomed her without knowing who she was or what she owned. And sometimes the most powerful, life-changing connections begin with a simple question. Can I sit here? Daniel Carter proved that you don't need $1 billion to change a life. You just need the courage to be kind when the world is looking the other way. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Chip Healing Stories, where small moments create life-changing stories.